It's a rainy day here in Durham, North Carolina. We're going to see what else is going on around the world and how the weather is treating Lee Newton roads and if anybody else pops in as well. But definitely that is what's happening here in Durham, North Carolina is the rain is here and definitely along those lines. And of course, we're seeing other things that are happening in the world and in the world of the news and all in that space. As a matter of fact, it looks like that whole battle between Disney and DeSantis is going full throttle. As a matter of fact, Disney has apparently canceled plans for a $1 billion campus. So they are canceling that massive development plan. So apparently that is part of the price tag of this battle that is going on between DeSantis and the fine folks over there at Disney. And then in other news, it looks like Zelensky will be attending the G7 meeting in Japan. And he also recently made a surprise visit to Saudi Arabia. And of course, the G7 leaders are committing to more Russia sanctions, with Ukraine's Zelensky set to attend that summit that I was just referring to, and all along those lines. So we're going to bring in some other folks and see what they've got to say about what's going on in the world and all in that space. I'll get to some other news stories, and then, of course, I'll bring in Lee Newton Rhodes and see some of the things that he is finding out as well. And of course, they are saying that the G7 will be trying to increase financial pressures on Russia to end that war that has been going on for more than a year now, and all in that space. So definitely we will see what happens in that regards. And apparently it looks like Ukraine has struck back around Bakhmut as Wagner reaches the last streets in that particular city. And like I said, Syria's Assad has arrived in Saudi Arabia in the first visit since the war over there. So definitely looks like there are some things going on in that space of the world, with Syria's Assad rejoining the Arab League for the first time in 13 years. So we're going to see what this does in terms of world politics and all along those lines. And over there in Colombia, the Colombian president has retracted claims of four missing indigenous children found alive in Amazon after a plane crash. So that is one of the things that's coming out of Latin America and all in that space. And there was a magnitude 7.7 earthquake in the Pacific, which has triggered tsunami alert islands east of Australia. So we've had a couple of things coming up out of Australia. We haven't seen Shaquille in a while, so we're going to have to find out from Shaquille when he comes back his reaction to some of these climate and earth things that have happened in Australia, because I know there was a lot of conversation around Australia and the eclipse that they saw a few days ago. It might have been almost a week ago, or all along those spaces. So I was going to ask Shaquille if he had actually been there when that took place, but I think he actually may be in the States, but we'll find out whenever he makes his return trip and all in that space. And by the way, if you're wondering what China is doing, China G is unveiling his grand development plan for Central Asia. That's right. They are, while we're having the G7 in the West, China is hosting Central Asian leaders and offering attention that Russia definitely cannot do. So definitely G is apparently saying that China and Central Asia must unleash or fully unleash their potential. So he is hosting a summit with leaders of 5 Central Asian nations. And then over there in Italy, there are travel warnings. And apparently that is because of the deadly floods that were happening in that part of the world, which has left 13 dead and forced 13,000 from their home. And there are weather emergencies declared across Europe as deadly torrential rain has stricken in that area. And definitely there's news coming out of Pakistan as well, as Pakistani forces have surrounded Imran Khan's home as the political crisis over there is escalating as well. So we're going to see what folks have to say about some of these things. Why do you go ahead? I'm sorry, I'm going to bring Sasha, I mean, not Sasha, bring Lee into this conversation, but apparently in Australia, a great grandmother was tasered by officers in Australia, and despite the fact that they had a walk-in frame. Um, well, I'm gonna have to read this article because this has definitely got me confused. This is why you would taser a 95-year-old, but maybe they were doing some things that they didn't need to be doing, because even 95-year-olds can do things that are not all that great in life and all in that space. So I'm going to pull up this article, see what they're talking about in this particular case and all along those lines, assuming that they will let me get to that and all in that space. But while I'm looking for that, I'm going to bring in Lee Newton Rhodes and see what he's got going on as well. Like I was saying, Lee, it is about rain over here in Durham, so I don't know what it's doing in New York, New Jersey area, but you can tell our fine.
And Mark, it's gorgeous out here, but I'm going to piggytail on what you just said about a 95-year-old. Is there an age that we do not prosecute people for committing crimes, or do we give them license to go rob banks, murder, drugs, or whatever? 100-year-old.
Well, like I said, and I'm not sure. I mean, there has been cases of people that were found to have been prosecuted much later in life. There was that woman that was involved in the Emmett Till case, and I think that they pursued her after finding out some evidence much later, and she might have been in her 90s and stuff during that time. So, like I said, I'm trying to find out more about this article as to why they were even going after her. Apparently, she was an elderly Australian woman with dementia, and she was in hospital with life-threatening injuries after being tasered by police at a care home. So that definitely does not sound like all that's going on. But apparently she was carrying a knife. So officers were called to Yallambee Lodge in Combo, New South Wales, after reports that the 95-year-old Claire Newland was carrying a knife. The early morning incident has sparked outcry over what advocates say was a disproportionate response. So that's where I guess people are wondering, could they have not found another way to handle this case? I had the displeasure, and this was many years ago, and you don't know this, and I will just share it and everything, of seeing
just between the two of us,
seeing a person literally tasered to death here in the Raleigh area, because I was staying with a young woman that I was dating at the time, and we woke up in the morning, and there had been a disturbance, a domestic disturbance, and the neighbors across the street had a history of domestic disturbance, and the police did respond. They did taser the gentleman, and I want to say that they might not have known some of his other conditions, and that did lead to his untimely death and everything, because they were trying to seduce him, and they tasered him and did taser him in that way. So sometimes I guess police have to know the nature of what people can how they can handle things, and you don't always know what people's reactions will be to either to a taser or to.
And I understand that he had an underlying heart condition, and they were not aware.
That's my guess. Triggered it. Exactly, that would be my guess. Yes.
That's obviously it's very sad, but this is something I at least can't know and can't start asking questions. Excuse me, sir. Can you wait a minute before we taser you? Do you have any underlying heart conditions?
Well, that's right.
But maybe this should give pause to people who do have underlying heart conditions. Maybe they shouldn't do something that's going to entail having the police come and taser them. That's just a thought.
Yeah, that's a good thought and everything. And don't know, I can't remember if the family pursued any law enforcement against that, because that was several years back. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, that you don't always know what is going on. And that was to the point of what my cousin had told me when I had a conversation with him, because some people were thinking that you can shoot to not kill, but shoot more to maim and everything. And
you can't do that. You can't do that, because once you start doing that, shooting for the arms or the legs, my understanding, you're more apt to miss or for it to go through the body and hit somebody else, the bystander.
That is part of the conversation that I was having with that particular cousin. The other thing is that adrenaline is a very real thing. So if you hit,
both sides,
you maim and everything, that oftentimes it will just to cause them to continue to rush at you and everything. So you may put yourself more in jeopardy than less in jeopardy when you don't shoot at the mass. And
there's a video going around. It's a few years old. You may have seen it. Chris Rock, how not to get arrested by the police. Yes. It's a little on the humor side, but it's worth. Everybody should see it.
Yeah, and I have seen similar things to that, about whether it's on the comic side or on the serious side. There is even a group here that gives people ideas of how they should handle it if they are approached by police officers. And a lot of it is being very respectful of the police officers, and also not trying to incite them in any way.
Why aren't youth getting that message from the schools, from parents, from media, Hollywood, from music? Why aren't they getting that message?
Why kids do with the things they do, who knows? But I do know that those messages are being put out. It was a community group that I first heard of that message. There was a retired police officer that did an event about a month or two ago that put out that message. So, I mean, you can put out the message all day long, but if people are not listening to the message, that is another question, because I do know that the message is very much out there the way that you should handle it. There is some music forms that are not always conducive to that, but then again, there are also some people that do. They're studio gangsters. So, like I said, even that's part of the conversation with Mr. Morant, the basketball player, because there are people that think that the gangster lifestyle is cool to emulate and all along those lines. But as I've been told, and I've heard several friends of mine tell me this, if you put them in a literal gang situation or in a literal gang environment, most of them would not survive more than 3 minutes, if that. So, like I said, they emulate it because they think that it's quote unquote cool. But
and they're getting that message from where again, Mark?
They're getting it from different sources. I mean, some of them get it from the media, some of them get it from their friends, some of them get it from
no, from the friends. I understand, because the friends are peers, the same age, but to get it from an adult is just totally irresponsible.
Well, I mean, there's entire music forms that might be considered irresponsible.
I understand that. But this is a rhetorical question. Don't these people know that the people listening to their music are going to think, or are going to know, that these people are glorifying gang life, which is to their detriment?
I mean, but
it's okay for a dollar.
But it's not. You can't just put that on rappers. I mean, let's look at Hollywood, which is glorified gang life forever.
I'm on board with you with that. I'm on board with you on that. You're not going to get any argument from any media, any platform.
So there's a variety of medias. I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily be trying to do any of the headbanging that goes on either, and that's in the punk rock and some of the rock environments as well.
So, I understand, but you're not going to get that from classical. You're not going to get that so much from country and western.
Well, I don't know about country and western. There's been some rough things that have been said about police and other kinds of violence within country and western. So I can't say that about country and western or
to glorifying violence.
There's been some songs that have definitely glorified violence, even in the country and western songs. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I mean,
I'm assuming what you're saying is true, Mark. And to that point, I agree with you. They have just as much blame, also.
Yeah, because I mean, wasn't what was the famous Kenny Rogers song? There was a song that he did that was very much a glorification of some of the criminal lifestyle and everything. And I can't think of the title of the song, but I do remember that it was definitely done there, and it might have been tongue in cheek, but it definitely had some.
It was a Johnny Cash song that I think was pathetic in terms of just shooting a man to see what it felt like. I forgot the name of the song. It was a disgusting song. I love his music, but that song to me was I won't listen to it.
We won't listen to that particular song. And like I said, different people have different reasons for the things that they put out and all in that space. And some of it is the industries themselves, meaning the music industry. I mean, part of what goes on with the music industry is that it is very much of a monopoly as well, because definitely there are a lot of major players that are in that. Well, not a lot. There are a few major players, and those few have a serious monopoly. So a lot of times they dictate what is put out there, and some of it is copycat stuff. I mean, which means that if once something is a hit and a success, they will repeat that hit and a success ad nauseum. And some of
I think though they're losing their monopoly, just like the media is losing the monopoly on journalism. Now we have a thing called internet podcast. On the music side, obviously we have Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, where things are being put out there and not through traditional means.
Yeah, but they still have a lock on the distribution methods and things of that nature. So they definitely have.
It is much easier. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, you can do something independently, but then how easy is it to get out to the masses? You can get out to your core group, but you still got to find some place to perform at. And a lot of times those performance places are owned by the big monopoly companies still. So like I said, that is where it becomes still a issue in that sense. So that is.
Do we want to talk about the CEO summit going on in California this weekend? We got some representatives there from Pod TV. Nick is there, Kim is there, David Walker is there.
Yes, and I understand that they're going to be speaking today. I don't know. I don't
Yes,
think they're going to be speaking on
an amazing lineup of speakers.
TV.
If you took a look at it,
I did see the lineup, and it was some very impressive folks that'll be there, and everything. It might even be a more impressive lineup than the G7 summit in terms of like actual juice and all of that. But yes, we do have both Nick and Kim are there. I understand David Walker is there. Shaquille may be there. I'm not sure about his situation, is whether he's there or not. But definitely, it'll be interesting to see and all in that space. I have a question for you because apparently President Biden was there. I just saw this article and everything paying silent tribute to the victims of the Hiroshima bomb. I know that when Sasha has been here, he has brought it up a couple of times about this notion of a nuclear war. I think that may be a last ditch effort from Putin as he continues to lose his war and everything. How concerned as a politician and a presidential politician are you about the real possibility of there being a nuclear war? Because some people, including Sasha, will be like, if it happens, we'll only lose a certain amount of the population. It won't like destroy the entirety of the world and all in that, even though the the horrible narrative is that it's the apocalyptic kind of a nuclear war where there's very few of us that remain. But when they do these end studies, they seem to think that it won't be the complete destruction of mankind, but it could be a sizable blow. But you are in the political lane, so are you ever worried that there could be this massive nuclear war that could definitely be detrimental to the world, not just the United States, but the world in general?
100%. There are people who do not have our culture, our way of thinking. I mean, during World War II, they had a thing called kamikaze pilots.
Right.
People who were willing to die for the cause and intentionally, 9/11, these people intentionally gave up their lives. You have Iran, you have these homicide bombers in Israel who they don't mind dying for their cause. They think they're going up, to a world to come or what have you. And it's not restricted to those, cultures. If you have people who feel, what do they have to lose? They're losing anyways. Might as well take out the other guy with me. They'll cut up their.
Yeah, but we've had that here as well. I mean, wasn't that part of what the whole Jim Jones incident in that part of South America was? It wasn't that part of what Waco was? So there have definitely been some folks here in the United States and in the West that have had a similar mindset. So I don't know that we can just limit it to those in the Asian and in the Middle Eastern countries, because there are definitely some people in the United States that have a similar mindset. I mean, there will be some that will argue, and I'm not saying that they are right and wrong, that some of those folks in the January 6th attack might have been putting themselves in harm's way as well, and were doing it because they were frustrated by the results of the election. But that didn't mean that they couldn't have been.
Mark, that's a fair point. I didn't in any way mean to just talk about those groups. Those are the first ones on top of my mind. You're 100% right. There are other groups who, Jim Jones is a famous case, where they don't mind dying with the enemy, so to speak.
I mean, isn't one of the famous sayings that exists even in Western narratives as well is that you should be willing to die for your cause, whatever that cause was? Because I've heard that narrative put out by a.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's you should have your enemy willing to die for the cause.
Well, I've heard that, but I've also heard the narrative that if you believe in a cause, you should be willing to die for it. That's the
you should be willing to fight for it. Right. If it means dying, it means dying, but not intention. No one wants to die for their cause. They're willing to versus wanting to. There's a difference.
No, but I'm saying if the United States was attacked, and we have been attacked before, we've been attacked now twice, 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. If the United States was attacked, I'm pretty sure that the military response, whether it was from a Republican or a Democrat, as they get the soldiers up for battle, would be that they are defending the honor of the country, defending the freedom of the country and the integrity of the country, and that the folks that are going to battle have to be willing to die for that cause. I mean, that's part of the narrative that happened with the Vietnam War, because there were some people that were frustrated by that narrative and were finding out that they were maybe being puppets into that whole political theater and didn't necessarily agree with the reasons that they were over there in Vietnam. And I'm sure the same can be said for Afghanistan and a number of the other places that we have fought wars at. Because sometimes when you go to fight the wars, you find that you are not necessarily fighting for the reasons that you have been told that you are fighting for.
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind, though, patriotism, the love of country, is not the same as it was 50, 60 years ago. People are not learning in school and from their parents a love of America and willing to fight for America and American values. They're learning America's horrible, America's evil.
No, I can't say that because, like I said,
I can. That's what I hear in the media. That's what I hear in the news.
Well,
that's what I hear with Antifa.
In the news and the media, but I know that quite a few people that are proud to be Americans, proud to be involved in the American economy and the American government, the American various other things, proud to be American athletes and a number of other aspects of being American, even American business people. So I can't say that.
In the last few years, Mark, in the last few years, flying an American flag was not seen in a positive light by a lot of people in the country, by the media. It was seen as a sign of racism, seen as a sign as pro-Trump, not pro-America. Well, you fly a flag, you're a target.
No, and I don't think that it depends on how you're flying the flag. Is you're flying the
flag?
No,
you fly like traditional way, front door out the window, or on your car, or however. How can you fly a flag in a negative way?
It depends on how you fly the flag. Like I said, if you are flying the flag in the sense of you are claiming that you want to make America great again.
No statement. You're just flying the flag with no statement.
Hold on a second. If you're going to fly the flag in the sense of make America great, which is one of the slogans that was used in the whole Trump campaign and everything, then some people, as a matter of fact, we aired on, and it's aired a couple of times. You can go back and watch it. There is a performance of a musician in out of Lincoln, I think, in like the Lincoln Theater up in New York, or maybe it's the one that's elsewhere and everything. But it's a jazz band, and that's actually literally what he asked. And he asked, and he ran down a couple of reasons of when was America great again, and named down a couple of things that usually are put down as being America great again, including the bombing of Hiroshima, which I just mentioned, and the response to the conductor wasn't that great for the people that were involved, and all in that sense, meaning those that were bombed in Japan and in other parts of the world. And he got down, and then the joke, if you want to get down to the joke, because he named a couple of things, including the Civil Rights Bill and a couple of other things and reasons that, and even when it got to the Civil Rights Bill, it's like, well, we're still fighting for that, meaning that the promises had not been kept and all in that space. And then the punchline was maybe we should go back to 1492 before Columbia got here, because the folks that were here prior seemed to be happy before Columbus got here. And then we got into this whole American conversation, and then they played the song that was based on that notion. So he created a song based on that notion. Now, some people may take offense to that, but the audience that I saw seemed to enjoy it and got some good laughter out of it and everything, because there were several things that can be seen to be negative about America. Like I've told Shaquille, and I'll tell you, and I've told others, I don't think that it is wrong to be critical of a country, including your own country. There's that whole notion of cleaning up your own house. Like I said, if you've got a messy house and you want to clean up that house from within, I think that is a fair criticism and a fair thing to do and everything.
I agree with you, but there's a big difference between
America. It's just that you want to clean up what you see as a problem.
I agree with you, but there's a big difference between constructive criticism and spewing lies and hate.
Well, I mean, and there can be lies and hate spewed on both sides, because I've seen lies and hate spewed from both
lies
sides.
And hate, there's no excuse for that in a civilized society.
Well, there should be no excuse, but lies and hate have been going out there forever and a day, not just here, but throughout the world. And I don't think that it is something that will unfortunately ever be solved, because I was actually in a very interesting room yesterday. I think it was in Clubhouse. Matter of fact, I know it was in Clubhouse, but it was a one of those healing rooms, or kind of like wellness rooms or something along those lines. And the gentleman that runs it, I'm trying to think of Sid's last name, I'm trying to get him to come on the Pod TV, but because he's very much of a positive influence and a positive thought person involved in a interracial relationship with his wife and all. In that sense, I think they've been married and got kids and all in that kind of way. But one of the things we talked about was this whole notion of, and it became a very nice and interesting conversation, was this notion of otherism. And I think that Jacoby had mentioned it, and I know that I've mentioned it.
What does it mean?
Which is this notion of blaming the other for what's going on. So it's like otherism is kind of like,
victimhood.
It's not so much victimhood, because that's on their side, but the otherism is that you sit there and it's like, I have an issue with that person because they are gay. I have an issue with that person because they are black. I have an issue with that person because they are a woman. I have an issue with that person because they are whatever the dividing factor is. So it's kind of like the boogeyman in the room kind of thing. Like when we saw some of that otherism when the pandemic first came out, and I'm not saying that the pandemic did not come from aspects of the Asian society and everything, but you did see some people that, because it was supposedly happening in Asia, started blaming every Asian that they ever ran across. And the same with the Middle East when 9/11 happened. So you did have some people that are very much willing to target a group either because they think it is an easy target, hence the transgender population.
Mark, when you were little, I know when I was little, elementary school, junior high, high school, there was no such thing as identity politics. You were American, period. There was no hyphen after that.
No, I cannot say that, because I literally in college went to a room that was, it was me. I was invited to a party from one of my schoolmates, and literally the party was called Manly Night. So there was some identity politics at that particular time. We're talking the 80s, and I was involved in Amnesty International and a number of other things. So there was plenty of identity politics in the 80s, and I would even argue
maybe that's when it started.
So, but it's been out there for a while, because I remember getting invited to a party that was literally called Manly Night, and when you got there, it was a bunch of people of different ethnicities telling ethnic jokes and watching blue movies, and all in that space. I did not stay there that long because I found it to be somewhat distasteful, so it was not something that I was trying to be encouraging or going on. But when you walk in there and there are a Mexican gentleman that is telling apple jokes, because an apple is a Hispanic version of an Oreo and all of that, and there are people that have German and other descents that are telling jokes against their ethnicity and everything. I did not find it appealing an event, and not even the blue movies were appealing. And I'm not knocking blue movies. Blue movies can have their purpose and everything, but it wasn't to be hanging out with a bunch of dudes watching them.
But didn't most people just get over the humor? If you didn't like it, you didn't like it. But like, there was an Archie Bunker, Fred Sanford. I can name you all kinds of comedians out there who told jokes. But today, maybe they're off color. They would be canceled, what have you.
They got a lot of flack.
You don't like it, don't listen.
They got a lot of flack during that time. Either Archie Bunker for sure. Carol O'Connor got into a lot of trouble for those jokes and everything. So I can't say that wasn't the case and everything. And even,
but that was one of the most popular shows on TV for years.
It was popular, and there was a counter show that was equally popular, but it was
more Sanford and Son. I remember that show.
I wasn't even thinking about Sanford and Son. I was thinking more along the lines of Maude, because Maude was very much of a liberal show. It was almost like, because I think she was supposed to be related to the Archie Bunker character, but she was definitely more of the liberal side of politics that was going on that time. Laugh-In was very liberal. The Smothers Brothers were very liberal.
I remember that.
Some of them were actually canceled in addition. So we can't say that canceled or attacks on culture are nothing new, because I mean, the Smothers
No, definitely nothing new. But most people, they just either didn't bother engaging, or they just got over it.
I can't say that. I mean, there were shows that were literally canceled during that time as well. I think one of the Smothers Brothers, part of the reason that they didn't stay as long as people wanted them to was because of some of their stances on the Vietnam War. So there was a number of people that were not pleased with those stances on the Vietnam War, not pleased with some of the stances that people took on civil rights, not pleased with a number of things. So I cannot say that is a new.
They were canceled for their political views?
Totally.
Is that something positive?
I don't see it. But I mean, you got people that
George
are,
Carlin would be rolling over in his grave.
and George Carlin was sometimes canceled. I mean, for some of his things, and let's not forget that there was those whole words that he couldn't say and everything, because that became part of the conversation as well. So definitely, this has been going on for a number of years. There were people that put out newsletters, including some around slavery and around other aspects of society, that were definitely harassed and canceled in some ways because of their stances. There were anti-Vietnam War newsletters that were canceled or threatened. So, like I said, this has been going on for decades. And speaking of that, apparently even in the fine folks in China, they're in the news for exactly what you're talking about, because the Chinese police detained a woman for posting online in support of the comedian who was punished for making a joke that authorities said insulted the Chinese military. So
Can the Chinese, can they take a joke? Or, there's no humor in China.
Well, as like I said, there's different places that have different notions of what humor is. I'm not a comedian. I do have friends in that space, including Jadovi and my friend Ronnie Warner, but I don't know that they can take the different people's idea of a joke are handled differently. I mean, I have a friend or an acquaintance that is out of Pakistan, and one that is Pakistani American, actually a couple of them that are Pakistani American. And, some of the jokes that they would want to tell, they could definitely run into problems if they told those jokes in those environments. Because I remember one I interviewed maybe about 2 years ago, and she is a dentist there, but she is also a young stand-up comedian and does quite well in that circuit. But some of those jokes, if she told them in that part of the world, would probably lead to prosecutions, and maybe even some severe prosecutions, because there are certain countries that are more severe in the way they handle humor and everything. So
because they feel it's hateful, or they feel they don't like being the brunt of the joke, the administration, so to speak, the leaders.
There's probably an attack on the leaders and everything, and some of the leaders are more dictatorial than others. So definitely that is a issue and everything. Some of them will take it to other outlets, whether that be Clubhouse or whether that be Facebook or a number of other places. But then you run into the problem of those organizations being their own worst enemies, but in the sense of being censors and all in that space. And sometimes the censorship is over just a difference of opinion. Like you said,
on the humor side, I'm sure you heard of the Onion, which is a satirical site. There's a thing called the Babylon Bee, which is also satirical. Anyways, a number of years ago, the Babylon Bee posted an article. I forgot the title of the article, what it was about. It's satire. But in our environment, they got fact checked. Don't be fact checking. It's a joke. How do you fact check a joke?
Well, you're not supposed to be able to fact check a joke, but I mean, that part of it is what you just said. It's satire. And I would agree with you that there are a lot of people that don't understand satire. I've written satirical pieces both when I was in college and even outside of college. And some people may have taken those to be totally serious and everything. I wrote a satirical piece one time that some of the religious right might not have liked, because it was literally a satire on Billy Graham at that time and everything. And I think it was around the time that Mapplethorpe was having that whole piece that was very controversial and everything. And I just have to find that piece to share it with you. And I wrote another satire that literally was a satire on the nature of politics, because there was a gentleman that was in a mental health environment, like a mental health asylum, and he's talking to his therapist and is basically bringing up the fact of all the things that are going on in the world that are problematic, whether that was pollution, whether that was various wars that were taking place at that time. I think at the time I wrote it, it was probably like Vietnam and some of the other things that were going on, some of the issues that we even talk about here on the network and everything, including homelessness and educational strife and a number of other things. And the brunt of the joke was that as he went back into his room to talk to Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and a bunch of the other folks, he turned around and asked the therapist, now who's the real crazy one, me or the politicians that are doing all of this insanity?
Probably. Homelessness, on a serious note, it's very sad. Homelessness is always very sad
Yeah.
because it's usually a mental health aspect of that. Now that we have all these illegals coming here in massive numbers, it's just going to get much worse.
It could get much worse in all of that space. I did not see them when they popped in, and I was busy trying to pull up different news stories, and we were having this engaging conversation. But we do have Dan and Sasha. Hey, Sasha, I know you're going to talk about it in a little bit and everything, but a lot of folks are excited as to what Zelensky is doing in terms of getting out there and getting the drumbeat of support. So, what specifically is he hoping to get from Saudi Arabia? Because apparently he just met with Saudi Arabia, and of course he's going to be at the G7 summit. So, what are some of the things that he is particularly expecting to get? I was actually somewhat surprised, maybe pleasantly surprised, that he had gone to Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia does have some oil and some other wealth that is there. But what is your reports as to what he was hoping to gain from the visit to Saudi Arabia, and what is he hoping to gain during the G7 summit there in Japan?
I think we Europeans and Americans and Canadians, for that matter, Australians probably as well, we all underestimate the potential of Saudi Arabia. They themselves pronounce that they are a next Europe, that all the wealth, all the scientific developments, everything else will be in the near future in Saudi Arabia, thanks to, of course, wealth which comes from the natural resources, but also the democratization of their policies. And we can talk as much as we want about killing the journalist in Turkey several years ago and many other things. Yeah, but we might as well talk about the Putin, who is a killer of so many people, the people, real people with their names, such as Alexander Litvinenko and many, Anna Politkovskaya, many others. I'm not going to repeat it here. So, but Russia is not going to be a center of the future developments, but Saudi Arabia will, and it's getting there very quickly. And to ignore it would be a great mistake. And by the way, I would like to remind everybody that back in 8th, 9th centuries, it was Arab countries and Arab people who were leaders of the world at the time in sciences, in medicine, there's many other areas. And it was remaining so for several centuries until they were crushed. Yeah, Lee, what question?
Yeah, the war in Ukraine with Russia has been going on for a long time now.
Yeah.
It seems like a very long time. Is the UN impotent? Are they just totally useless as a international agency to stop conflicts?
It's an interesting fact that when a few weeks already into the war, many countries were trying to finish the war ASAP, and they were traveling to Kiev to meet Zelensky. And he cheerfully accepted all the visits from Macron, from Scholz, from many other leaders. And Biden was in Kiev, if you will. Now, what's happened next? After meetings in residential of Ukrainian president, next day, all of them were traveling to Bucha, where incredible atrocities were done by Russian army, that including killing civilians, raping women, raping kids, and doing something, looting all the houses and so on, killing people right on the street. When say somebody walks on the street, so somebody is just cold-blooded killing him from rifle. So this is what was happening there. So when people saw it for themselves, any peace talks were crushed. There is no more peace talk. Zelensky made it very clear that with a killer and terrorist Putin, there are no talks. So all these things about, why we don't make a peace or so on, How you make a peace with the terrorists who came to your house, killed your relatives, raped your wife, killed your child, and now, okay, let's sit down to talk. Why are we fighting?
So if Ukraine doesn't want to have peace talks with Russia, what do they want? What do they need in order to stop?
Maybe I will sound banal, but I would like to propose that Russia immediately will free the territory Ukraine of its army. Out! The end of story.
So they are up to talks then, but their demands would be that Russia leave their territories.
They
They don't want to conquer Russia. They don't want to put, like river from the river to the sea. They don't want to do that.
They don't want Russia. Any fool who dreams about going and take over Russia is a complete idiot, because this country is so undeveloped. It's such a garbage. They don't have toilets. They don't have anything. So if somebody is taking over Russia, somebody has to develop Russia. Somebody has to try to build something out of the mess. Why anybody would do that?
Hey, Sasha, along those same lines.
Well, I don't know. When Trump was president, he spoke to North Korea in terms of developing that. Maybe there is some aspect of helping Putin build up the country to get him stop doing what he's doing.
What was the result of his visits to North Korea, love letters? What is the result?
I think it all fizzled out.
Why?
I don't know. It's a good question. I do not have an answer. It's a good question.
When you have some talks and the two idiots on both sides, what would you expect to happen?
Hey, Sasha, just really quickly, would it just be out of Ukraine, or does the Ukrainian government also want the reclaiming of Crimea as well? Because that is part of the conversation I've heard as well. So do Russians also need to release Crimea as well, from what
Absolutely, 100%. They have to release Crimea. They have to release all the Donbas territory. By the way, Donbas will be taken. That's one instance when Ukrainian army actually will cross the Russian border, because they have to encircle Donbas region. And what you do, you're already there on one side. Now they are going to take Bakhmut from both sides, and they will free that. And then, as a part of overall plan of Donbass, they will go to Belgorod, they will go to Kursk regions of Russia, and they will encircle Donbass and will attack that from the side that Russian expected the least. So this is actually the instance when Ukrainians will enter Russian territory. As Crimea, they don't need to do much, because Crimea, all they have to do is to finish this Crimean bridge, which unites Crimea with Russia. They already damaged it considerably, but they have to completely destroy it, and then Crimea will be cut off any supplies. Period. They will all die there, or they will give up.
Hey, let's see, we've got Steve here with us as well. Quick question. This is actually for both Dan and Steve. There is a small country that has come up with a very great idea, but I was going to throw it out here and see if it's something that we should consider for the United States. And I hate to say that there might be something that Steve is not a big fan of, because he's in politics and is as well. But apparently the Ecuador Constitutional Court has voted unanimously Thursday to reject multiple challenges that sought to invalidate their president, Guillermo Lasso's decree dissolving the opposition-led National Assembly, as it tried to oust him during an impeachment trial. So with all the things that are going on in our own politics, and I've heard definitely Kim, who's one of our founders, has mentioned this idea. Do we need to just disband the entirety of the U.S. Congress and start from scratch? Because it does seem that people on both the left and the right have gotten too much of this bickering back and forth, and I don't know that we're accomplishing as much as we probably should accomplish. So don't know that we oftentimes borrow from other parts of the world, including a troubled country like Latin America. But is it something that we need to consider, the entire disbanding of the United States National Assembly and starting from scratch?
Well, first of all, I've got 2 minutes. Let me answer, because I got to board a plane, but I just wanted to say hi to everybody. And what we're going to talk about on Monday is real quickly, the attack on Kyiv. We continue to pray for Ukraine. We're going to talk about Twitter and Google and them upholding lawsuits against them. It's a big win for big tech against that they were connected with terrorism. And we're going to talk about the debt ceiling, Congress. But let me end this note before I leave. I do think that the political systems at the federal level and state level are so dysfunctional at this point. For every step forward, let's take North Carolina, for example. We had Medicaid expansion, everything was on board, and now there's last minute negotiations saying, oh, we forgot to tell you that, so it may not go through, right? Same thing with Congress. We see the debt ceiling, we see many things. I don't think it's ever going to start from scratch, Mark. That would be impossible, unless it was like designated survivor and there was some attack on the Capitol and the whole Congress was wiped out. But I think the system is so broken because it's driven by finance and money and special interests that people are just so disconnected from each other that they've gotten away from solving the problems of the country. And I think that's really what we need. And I think from a presidential level, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I'll end with this. I began my morning today running the Lincoln Memorial, and I thought about that very point. You know, at what point does the President of the United States come, like Lincoln did, and say, we have to make a decision. Are we going to save the Union? And that the people that gave their lives for the U.S. during the Civil War did not die in vain, right? Why did Dan Worthington serve in the military? Why did people serve in our armed forces? They served to keep all of us free. And I really think that's something we don't talk about a lot now. So to answer your question, yes, it's dysfunctional. I do think we have to break the system. Maybe bring in outside people to run for the government. We tried that with Trump. They tried that with Trump. It didn't work. It did work to win, but maybe having more outside candidates coming in to run for Congress. So that's my final closeout of the day. I've got to board a plane, but I'll be there Monday. Thank you so much, guys. And
Appreciate you and everything. Dan, what is your thoughts? You're the legal expert.
Take care, Steve.
Didn't think that it was legally possible, but
no, it's not legally possible to do because there's no constitutional mechanism to dissolve Congress because of the separation of powers doctrine in the United States Constitution. What has happened that the founders, I don't think, anticipated was the deep state, the staffers and the CIA and the FBI and the other law apparatuses. I don't think they saw them becoming as corrupt as they are and becoming political when they're supposed to be apolitical. They're supposed to be sworn to the Constitution of the United States and not the Democrats' version of the Constitution or the Republicans' version of the Constitution.
Dan?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on why it is that these people are so corrupt? Why it is that they've lost their vision of being patriots and working for the country, and it's more about them and their pockets?
Before you answer that, Dan, because I wanted to add a caveat to what he just asked you, because you mentioned that you didn't think it's been going on for a while. There are some that would argue that even some of our founding fathers might have been involved in some deep state activities themselves. Now, whether that is true or not, that is for the historians to determine, and all in that space. But I don't know.
The deep state didn't exist then, Mark, because the deep state, by its nature, is unelected officials. And you know, the problem really is about money and corruption. It didn't start with the Clintons, but they were a big part of it.
There wasn't money and corruption during the Jefferson era, and
there was money and corruption. You can go back as far as the founding of this country, and there's been money and corruption involved, right? There's been intrigue always with political differences and that kind of thing. I mean, look at the hassle between Jefferson and Adams and Jefferson and the others. Everyone kind of was behind George Washington, but after that, it just sort of ended up into a little bit of a free fall. But there's always been mechanisms in place to kind of balance things out. As one party tries to capture absolute power over the nation at the exclusion of the other party, because we have a two-party system, then that leads to tremendous abuses. I think that maybe David has it, Walker has it right. in that we run a third party and beat these two idiots that are probably going to end up running. Neither one of them should be running because neither one of them are in the best interest of the nation or our political stability and long-term prosperity. Biden because of his policies, Trump because of his temperament.
Dan,
And yeah,
let's say we did that, and let's say they were successful. Do you not think the deep state would attack them, that person, that administration, just like they did the Trump administration?
absolutely. But you know, the one thing that we do know is the deep state has unmasked themselves now. We know they're there. The thing that we can thank Trump for is the fact that he unmasked them.
He exposed it. I agree. Is there any reason why on his way out, or someone else just flash everybody in terms of just fire, everyone fireable?
But the Democrats wouldn't let that happen. And the reason they weren't is because...
Do they have a say?
Because
all the at-will employees?
Well, but there's more protections to those people than we would dare to even speak of.
The management level?
And the Democrats have a vested interest in keeping the status quo because
both of them, the Republicans do also.
They have wait a second. They have the upper hand because most government officials are Democrats, are liberal, because they just are. I mean, look at the overwhelming numbers of administration that's civil service. They're Democrat. Most of them are Democrats, and they are overwhelmingly supportive of Democratic policies, and that's a problem. There needs to be they used to have a just like you said, Lee, a system where one party would come in, another party would go out. You fire all the bums on the other side and hire your own, and that's why there are civil service protections. You know, it's a balance, and then there's K Street and the corruption there, and then there's Soros and the corruption there, and the Clinton legacy continues to plague us. As does the Bush legacy and the CIA, corruption of the CIA when he was director, and the drug running in Southeast Asia and all the other BS that was going on, and Clinton's involvement in all that, right? When we're helping run drugs for then CIA director Clinton. So we've got a lot of issues in our country because of the money and the corruption.
Those issues have been going on for a while. I'm pretty much sure that Nixon and some of the others were involved in drug running as well. So there's
probably. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, probably, yeah. And because there's, anywhere there's big money, there's also big influence, right? And you just have to follow the money. The money buys corruption. And that's one of the
money buying corruption. What is everybody's thoughts? And I know we've only got a few more minutes to go and everything, and I mentioned it at the beginning, but there is this battle of a major corporation that apparently is going to think that money will dictate what they can do down there in Florida, because they're like, if y'all want to give us a hard time, we won't do this $1 billion land deal. Who knows? Maybe they'll take it to Texas, or maybe they'll take it to North Carolina, wherever they're going to take it. But Disney is playing a little bit of tit for tat with DeSantis and are saying, like, look, you thought you were getting ready to get a $1 billion windfall.
Disney can keep its tits. I don't care.
So what is your thoughts on that, Sasha and Lee? Because that is the other big news that is going on, is Disney is pulling out of a $1 billion land deal. Sasha, you're into investments. Is this going to help you maybe decide to get a Disney investment in your investment portfolio, maybe on your fund portfolio, or is this something that you're not going to deal with?
I wouldn't touch Disney for several reasons. It's a very difficult company to understand. It has parks, which are now in quite jeopardy with DeSantis. It has cruise line, which is unclear how profitable it is, if it's profitable at all. They have online business, streaming movies and so on, but they cannot touch Netflix even close in several aspects. Netflix is a premier company. I would rather buy shares of Netflix in spite of how expensive they are, but it's better to pay more money for a premier service than to pay less money for very questionable value. That's my opinion.
Mark, it's very rare you're going to get a politician who's principled. Elon Musk now has a famous quote. He's quoting from Princess Diary now, in terms of, he was asked, why are you saying what you're saying? He's saying, like, why not? Give me money, give me power. I mean, do you have a conscience? Do you have principles or not?
I mean, part of what Elon Musk also said was, didn't he make a comparison between Soros and a certain celebrity or character from the X-Men and everything? So yeah, he's definitely been getting out there and saying some very interesting things. Now, whether they are based in facts or it's him doing some of that political theater, only time will tell.
There's got to be things more important to a person than power and money. Otherwise, why are you living?
You would think so, but some of those people that get money and power, they are glad to have that money and power. I mean, isn't part of the current space race less about Russia and the United States, or even the United States and China, and more about which one of these rich guys can take their toys up to space and enjoy their space time? Because if you look at the current space war, it is between Elon Musk, Richard Branson, and one or two other folks that are in that whole billionaire class and everything. So they didn't have anything better to do than grab their latest toys and try to go up into space, even though the latest trip was not all that successful. It's actually quite detrimental and all.
It's a real blast. It was a real blast.
Yeah, it was totally a real.
It was unmanned though, or
Yeah,
unpersoned, I should say.
Yeah, it was an unpersoned one, and who knows? Maybe they'll get up there. I mean, there's some folks that would argue that they want the rich all to go up there, and there are some people that I've heard are afraid of that. They're afraid that some of those that are in the deep state, as Dan has called it, and some of those that are affluent are wanting to go to space because they already see that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and they are planning their great escape plan and all in that.
Well, they're not going to be able to escape what they've done. That's the point. I mean, there's always accountability.
Is there, Dan? Doesn't appear to be that case.
It's a part of nature. No, ultimately there is.
The Durham report, there's no indictments.
I'm talking about ultimate accountability. Ultimately, we all have to answer to our maker.
Okay, fine. In the world to come, but in this world, but
the world to come is the distance between the world to come and this world is a lot thinner than you think, especially as we grow closer to the end of times. People are going to have to pick sides, and we're seeing them pick sides. And a lot of religious leaders are saying, well, fine, you can do that, but you have to deal with the consequences of that. So my discussion with Jotovi, who doesn't seem to have.
But Dan, hold on a second.
He can make his own choices. I don't care, right?
No, Dan, just really quickly, isn't part of the problem that exists with that, and I hear what you're saying, and I'm not arguing that, and all along those lines, is that throughout history, we have always heard that the end is near. There have even been people that have predicted when the end is going to happen and even set dates, even though the Bible clearly says nobody will know the date or time that the end is to happen and everything. And then there is some people that will use that narrative to justify what is going on, because even during slavery, there were people that would tell the slaves, don't worry about it now because everything's going to be better when you get to heaven. That was part of the slave narrative.
And that's exactly true. But listen, read your book of Revelations, read your scriptures, and then you can just answer the question for yourself. I'm not God. I don't know the timing either, but just read the tea leaves, watch what's happening, see where the wicked have come out now, and they're just being blatant about it now. They don't even care, and they try to make right wrong and wrong right. We've had discussions about this on this program, and you can never make wrong right. It's not right. If it's against God's laws, it is against God's laws. God's laws are immutable. That's the way it is. They're not my laws. It's just I happen to believe in Him, and I want to be on His team. I don't want to be on somebody else's team, if you know who I mean.
You'll be glad to know that we have some religious leaders that are coming in June and July that have already agreed to be on the show. So I think Reverend Percy will be here, and there's another Reverend that I have already booked on the show so we can hear their conversations and their thoughts about that. But right now it's time for us to get out here so I can get to Sasha's Ukraine show and all in that space. But we do have two reverends that will be joining us. I think one is slated for middle of June, and the other, I think, slated himself for July. But they are out of the evangelical community, much as the other gentleman was. So we have got some folks that will bring their thoughts into this and everything. So I'm open to conversations with everybody, including those from the evangelical community. So we'll see what they've got to say, and I look forward to those conversations. But right now, we're going to get on out of here.
Y'all have a good
Take
weekend.
care. See ya.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.